Thanks to everyone for coming today. Appreciate the interest. So thanks for everyone's interest. It's great that people are excited about what we're trying to do here. We have spent the last few months writing a draft charter for a vertical training commission for the NSS. I'm glad to see that a number of members of both the ad hoc vertical education committee and the transition committee are here as well. It's great because it gives us an opportunity to hear feedback from the membership. We've also had an online kind of comment feedback mechanism, and we've received quite a number of comments that way, and they've all been very positive. So it's great that there's so much interest. I'm going to give a quick background on how we got here, discussing a possible charter for the NSS. I joined the vertical section, NSS vertical section in the summer last year, and I was asked to create some vertical training materials or update the vertical training materials for the vertical section. And so they had me come on as education chair. And I thought it was really important to understand how cavers wanted to learn vertical before I try to create something. Because if you don't know what your stakeholders want, then it's really hard to determine what to deliver. So we did a questionnaire. I put that questionnaire together with a small group, a number of cavers with different backgrounds, Bonnie Armstrong with NCRC, Riley Blackwell, who's had a lot of experience with in-grotto training programs with BPI, Deborah Hayer and Debbie Spoons, who have experience as educators, and then a colleague of mine at the University of Akron, who is an associate professor of curriculum and instructional studies. So we carried out that questionnaire, and the feedback that we've got was that there was a lot of enthusiasm for a national training program. There was frustration that the US hadn't already implemented such a program, that there aren't any identified core competencies within the US vertical for training, and no teaching standards established. And teaching standards, what we mean are like, how do you teach people? How do you teach people to learn? And obviously there's a lot to understand about teaching. I've been a professor for 20 years and I'm still learning the ways that the individuals learn and how you can adapt what you're teaching to fit needs. Right now, the training vacuum is currently filled by the NCRC, and that's a problem for the NCRC because they've got people coming on with very little vertical training for some courses that have quite a lot of rote work in them. So they're either having to adapt the curriculum and have training courses the day before they have an NCRC course, or they're having to keep an eye on people who are, quite inexperienced on rope during training. And those people who are getting the NCRC training, if you can imagine if you're overwhelmed with the vertical aspects of it, it's going to be hard to learn while you're taking that course. And there did seem to be a strong desire for standardization. While I was putting this together, I was actually approached by Gary Schindel, who is the NSS president, and he'd been thinking about some way that the NSS could be more involved in vertical training and vertical education. And this came from quite a few concerns from the NSS membership that there were accidents that were taking place because of lack of training. And is this something that we should look into? So I put a committee together. This was the ad hoc vertical training committee, which was basically created by Gary Schindel with input from Adam Weaver, who's the NSS administrative vice president. On that committee were myself, Amy Byrne, who has experience with the VPI grotto, Riley Blackwell, who has international caving experience and also with the VPI grotto, Eddie Cartea, who has a lot of experience with NCRC, Jean Harrison, who is the chair of the NSS vertical section, Deborah, who I've already mentioned, who's an educator, Tommy Polson, who is professional arborist, so uses vertical in his formal life and lots of international experience. Beverly Shade, who has lots of international caving experience. Tommy Shiflett, who's done a lot of the rigging in Virginia, also a lot of international experience. Jessica Van Ord, who has a lot of experience with NCRC. And Kurt Walden, who does a lot of training for the NSS vertical section and has a lot of experience in training cavers through the NSS. So that committee was tasked with figuring out what, if there was a training program, what that training program would look like for the NSS. So we identified the key assets that we had for developing a training program. That is that grottos are trusted with training. Mentors within the caving community are trusted. There's plenty of people within the NSS who are interested in becoming instructors. We already have model training organizations, the NCRC and CDS, that can give us a lot of really good guidance on how we could build something like this, recognizing that people aren't looking for regionally specific training, so they don't just want to learn how to cave in the Northeast or cave in TAG. And lots of interest from people who actually want to learn vertical but don't have the opportunities because either it's not available through their grottos or they haven't met people who are training others. They aren't caving with people who are training others. Key obstacles we identified is that there's a lot of regional polarization. Some people just adamantly refuse to use a technique that is not common for their caving. Seems to be a lot of old school resistance to new techniques, people not wanting to change the way things are done from the way it was when they learned. A general lack of knowledge of vertical techniques and technologies. Poor estimation of actual competencies and what people felt they knew and what they did know, and that was leading to some of these accidents that we were seeing. And those were going to make a program of implementation and standardization challenging. And I think we still continue to see this polarization a lot. It was being very entertaining on Facebook. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself the last week. So we decided to look at possible training models. There were 3 that we looked at. One is the current vertical section model, which is you provide materials to grottos and then let grottos teach people within the grotto. The other one is a NCRC model where you have regional and national training symposia and people attend those and get trained. The issues we felt with the vertical section model is that there's no way of ensuring that the trainers are qualified and actually understanding the correct way to train people and teach people. And it's not so much a lack of experience, it's understanding how people's brains work. Everybody learns a little bit differently. There's a lot of literature out there on training models and how to help people understand, particularly when you're using a kinesthetic approach, which is what vertical education will be. And you've got to really help people get to the point where they recognize how different people learn and how you have to adapt to each of those individuals. The NCRC model, it's a great model, obviously it works well, it's just not able to train enough people. I think before the pandemic, the average number of people that were going through an NCRC training was, less than 200 people. And if you think about the number of people who want to be trained nationally, the 200 people a year is just never going to get us where we need to be. So we came up with the idea of a hybrid model where you train the trainers. So it's a bit like the NCRC model where you have regional and national training, and that is to train trainers at those events. And then those trainers take that information to their grotto in the vertical section model. So the idea is this hybrid, which we call train the trainers. And there's a lot of literature in the education field about this approach. It's a very effective way of disseminating high quality information quickly. Certainly in my field, there's a lot of bioinformatics and some, high level stuff that this is really effective for. So any kind of education program where you're trying to reach out to lots of people and get them up to speed quickly, train the trainers works very well. The model that we envisioned for this was the idea of having a at the time we were calling it a board of regional coordinators that worked with an education committee. The education committee would produce the education materials that would go to the board for approval. The board would be responsible for training instructors. Those instructors would carry out regional training events to train basically grotto trainers, and then those grotto trainers would take the information back to their grottos. So the training materials themselves were developed by the education committee, and then the organizational process of getting that into the hands of grotto members occurred through the board of regional coordinators. And this is the idea of the trainer model, where you have a few people at the top who create a larger pool of instructors who take that to trainers who can then in turn take it to their grottos. Commission goals, the committee decided that commission goals should be to create competent and active vertical trainers within the US, creating an accessible program that's attainable and understandable to people of diverse backgrounds while maintaining minimal costs and bureaucracy. And we wanted to resist any efforts to develop a vertical certification as a mechanism to limit or restrict cave access in the US. The educational goals would be to identify core competencies and critical thinking needed in vertical caving. So it's not just like whether you use a rack or you use a bobbin, it's like you use that equipment correctly, right? It's not so much the device, it's the correct use of it. And we do a lot of critical thinking training. So it's not so much just get on this rope and slide down, but what happens is that it just happens. You know, if things go wrong, how do you deal with that issue? Then the education committee would generate educational materials that meet modern teaching standards with skills-based assessments and problem-solving scenarios. And then we would bring together the best teaching practices for vertical caving. We envision a 3-level training system. Level 1 is self-sufficiency and safety in a cave. So this would be what most people do, which is basically, you know, going in and out of a cave safely, a regular caving trip. Level 2 would be more advanced expedition levels, vertical skills. So something I like is when you go to Chebe, they have a ropes course in the trees that has some very technical things that you have to do, and people could take level 2 if they wanted to take those advanced vertical skills. And then level 3 would be an advanced rigging or other advanced techniques. Let's say you wanted to learn how to aid climb, or you wanted to learn technical rigging. That's a specialized course. You don't have to take that one, and we would have subject matter experts come in and teach aspects of that. So those would be kind of one-off yearly events, depending on if somebody wanted to teach those. We created a report that we delivered to the NSS Board of Governors on what the Vertical Training Commission could look like. They voted to create a transition committee that would take this report and these recommendations and turn it into a charter that the Board of Governors could vote on. And that's what we're discussing today, is the outline of that charter. The people that were on that transition committee were myself again, along with Gary Schindel, the NSS president, and Adam Weaver, along with Riley Blackwell. A new member is Gary Bush, who's a member of the vertical section. Eddie Cartea is the previous committee member, as was Devra. Jesse Hauser has a lot of experience in vertical. Angela Hooker has a lot of experience with the NCRC and education. Ron Miller, who has a lot of vertical experience. Marty Reams, who is the NCRC liaison to the NSS. Jessica Van Ord, I've already mentioned. Kurt Warden, I've already mentioned. And I wrote Time White, but Tim White, sorry about the typo, Tim. And so our job was to come up with a proposed charter. And that's the document that's being posted online. And that's the document that we're discussing today. So that draft charter was completed about 10 days ago. And the idea is to solicit public feedback on the structure of that charter, and then take the information that people are giving us and figure out how to integrate that into a charter. So one of the first statements in the charter is that our trainers recognize that the best teachers are always learning from their students and will utilize the best practices in education for effective training. And the reason we put that in is because there's a lot of people that view vertical training as kind of a top-down effort, that you tell people what to do and they do it. And if you're not willing to learn from your students and maybe recognize when you're making a mistake, or maybe you aren't communicating well, that you can learn from those processes. So that learning really is a two-way street. It's between the instructor and the student. And those are the kinds of people that we want to be trainers, people that recognize the importance of really good education and really working with your students to solve a problem and get to a goal. The other is to improve vertical safety while resisting efforts to develop vertical training certifications. I think a lot of people are worried that, we're creating a system to lock people out of caves, but actually we want to improve safety and access to caves. Certainly some of the cave preserves are having increasing issues trying to pay for insurance that maintains access. And if they can't afford the access, then they can't afford the insurance. So with better trained, safer cavers, we should reduce the number of reduce the number of accidents and improve the number of people that can enter those caves safely. So the charge that we created in the document is to create a training curriculum to help interested individuals obtain the appropriate and sufficient competencies, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills to be safe while using vertical. Develop and maintain a vertical training program that provides hands-on experience and training through vertical training courses that are accessible and attainable and understandable for people of diverse knowledge sets and backgrounds, while maintaining minimal costs and bureaucratic processes. You see a lot of the language from the report recommendation and previous committee made it through. And then lastly, to train competent, safe, and active vertical trainers to be proficient in teaching the education materials. So it's a slight change in the structure. Now, instead of a board of regional coordinators, we called it a council of regional coordinators. That's simply because with NCRC having a board of regional coordinators, we didn't want people accidentally communicating about the wrong thing to the wrong people. So we just wanted to have it very clear distinction in terminology just to stop confusion. And then the education committee became a curriculum committee. Within the Council of Regional Coordinators, you have 8 commissioners that represent 8 different regions, and I'll show you what those look like. They'll be overseen by a chair, a secretary, treasurer, and a webmaster. And these 11 people all have a vote on the committee. The CORC, the Council of Regional Coordinators, is responsible for the organizational structure of the VTC, the Vertical Training Commission, and getting materials into the hands of the trainers and grotto members, and making sure that people are trained effectively and safely. We weren't quite sure what terminology to use for instructor versus trainer. Some people were confused that if we used instructor at this level, who would train the trainers, then why are trainers not instructors? So there was a lot of confusion in the terminology here. So we actually looked at education literature and what the standard terminology is in published education literature, and they use the term master trainer. So master trainers train trainers, and then those trainers take it to the grotto. Master trainers and trainers are part of the Vertical Training Commission and have voting privileges. As a group, they can select regional coordinators and vote regional coordinators for these positions in the Council of Regional Coordinators. There's a separate group, which is the education group, the curriculum committee, that has 5 to 7 members. Within that group, they elect a chair. The chair does have the right to raise business and vote at the Council of Regional Coordinators meetings, and the chair also has the right to raise items to discuss and has a vote within the curriculum committee. And what we're hoping is that by creating these positions that are interactive in this way, we develop a lot of strong collaboration between these groups and a lot of communications to make sure that they're working together. And again, we've kept that structure where we have the Council of Regional Coordinators at the top, training trainers to regional trainers. So this looks very similar to the structure of NCRC. We're not seeing a lot different. We just have slightly different terminology here, where these would be instructors, and these would basically be participants in what you'd imagine a NCRC event. Except these participants aren't trained in rescue, they're trained in how to teach vertical techniques. And this is our proposed regions. So we had 8 regional coordinators. We've already had some feedback to create a Rocky Mountain region. So these states here, I think this is Montana. Is that Montana? Yeah, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota might actually drop in with Colorado to create a Rocky Mountain region. So we're still working on this. So this is why it's really important to get the feedback from NSS members, because that kind of feedback is what we're trying to get from you to build into the charter to create a more effective organization. This is the structure of how the materials are going to be developed. I think it's important to remember that this is just the materials that the Vertical Training Commission are going to create. We're not going to have any effect on people learning any way they want to learn. If people have no interest in learning from the Vertical Training Commission, we're perfectly happy. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make it safer and more accessible to more people, not exclude or restrict anybody's ability to do what they've already been doing. So this is really just for people that either don't have the ability to get training this way, or maybe want to take training back to their grottos and use materials that have been developed through the Vertical Training Commission. But certainly there's no effect that we're going to have on already established training routes that people have. I learned from my caving mentor, and I'm still learning every day, and I'm going to keep doing that. But I'm also looking forward to being involved in this process. The idea here is that the curriculum committee will develop materials. If they think those arrows going the wrong way, if the curriculum committee is going to vote, if they think that the education materials are ready to publish, then they go to the Council of Regional Coordinators. If they aren't ready to publish, and this arrows should be flipped, goes back to the committee. And they basically keep voting on it until they have a majority consensus that the materials that they developed are ready to publish. They go to the Council of Regional Coordinators, who review it. If they believe that the materials are appropriate, then they would send them out for use. If not, they go back to the curriculum committee. We're going to set up in the bylaws a peer review system. So it'll be very much like, if you were writing a science article, and people can give feedback in a constructive way that allows those materials to develop and improve. Anyway, when the materials come out of this group, they go to the master trainers. Master trainers can give feedback to the curriculum committee. Master trainers teach the material to the trainers. They can also give feedback, and then the trainers give that information to the grotto members who are being taught the material. And this is where we think the most important feedback is going to come from on those training materials, is the grotto members themselves. When they've been trained, we're actually going to ask them to give feedback directly to curriculum committee on the structure. As far as where those materials come from, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of really important stuff out there. It's already been generated. So anyone can submit materials to the curriculum committee. We're not going to take any materials without permission. We're only going to use materials that people give us and ask us to use. And I've already had 12 different documents sent to me unsolicited. So hopefully when we solicit this information, we'll get a big, massive material. So anything that people want to submit to us and would like us to consider, we'll take a look at and integrate the best materials into the curriculum that's developed. So the final charter, we're going to take your feedback. We're going to integrate the feedback that you've given us into the final document that we're going to submit to the board, along with notes on why the decisions were made, the comments that we're receiving from you, the comments that we've received online. And we're going to submit that to the Board of Governors in time for them to vote on the final charter in November. If you're interested in that meeting or talking to your representative on the board, you can go to www.caves.org. There will be information there on upcoming board meetings and agenda items for the board. If you want to give us feedback, the way to do it is going to be, this is a QR code. If you have your phone available and you have a QR scanner, go ahead and click on this or take a photo of this, and it will take you to the website directly. If not, you can go to learnmore.caves.org, index.php/NSS. I'm not going to read that out. All the ENSS members were sent this link, so you should be able to check your email from receiving an email from Adam from the NSS with the link directly here. This is the way that we're collecting information so that everybody has an equal playing field to submit information. We're not recording comments or questions from social media, but we do encourage people who are commenting there to take the information, write it up and submit it, and a number of people have done that already, and we do appreciate your feedback. So I try to keep that brief. I know there's a lot of information, there's a lot of background that we've done, and be more than happy to answer questions that people might have. Okay, so okay, Adam.
The first question is from Danny, and he says, I appreciate your position in non-establishing vertical certification for cavers. Do you envision certification and training standards for your various levels of trainers?
Yes. Yeah, so we have to develop that. So there's a lot for the education committee to develop. We didn't want to tie the hands of the education committee because those people are going to be nominated and put into that position. So we don't want to tie their hands too tightly. But the idea is that we create standards for teaching, and then those go to the master trainers, and the master trainers have to do a lot more training. Imagine more like a NCRC instructor does with IQ training. They have to do that in order to train the trainers. The students themselves are going to have certificates of completion. That's how we decided that we're going to avoid that certification, because certification kind of starts to tie us into that whole of restricting cave access and things like that. So we're doing a certification, not a certification program, we're doing a certificate of completion program.
Yeah, and then also we're going to track who's taking the classes so we know, that we're just,
oh yeah. No, we'll have records of everybody who's done what. You have an exam to complete, right? If you don't pass your proficiency skills, you're not going to be able to do it.
Okay, the next question, Hazel, is from Scott. He says, there will be periods when there will be great demand, followed by people feel they don't need training, new people join and demand increases again. How will the program get through these lean times as things wax and wane?
I don't know. I don't think we can build that into a charter.
Right.
Any suggestions, write them up, send them in.
All right. And like I said, if you have questions, stick them in the chat now. We're reading to Hazel. This is your chance to ask Hazel Barton questions. Oh, Hazel, Nick Anderson put in the chat, what is the best thing you've learned from Derek Bristol?
How to drink tequila and still walk in a straight line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not a very straight line, slightly bendy line.
I do have a question. Is the curriculum going to be a matter of public record, or is it going to be sort of restricted?
No, it'll be open to all NSS members.
Okay, just wondering. Thank you.
Hazel, I have a question. What is your position on grottos purchasing vertical equipment for club use versus individuals purchasing vertical equipment?
I think that's going to be up to the grotto to decide how they do that. I know a lot of grottos have gear stashes. Certainly we've already built into the charter that we want to try and raise some funds to have a gear cache, much the way that NCRC does. And also we want to create scholarships. There's a lot of people that maybe don't have access to it, their grotto, and coming to one of the regional events might be cost prohibitive for them. So we want to make sure that we generate a small pot of money so that we can provide scholarships for people who don't have the means to actually be able to come and do the training.
Another question, this was a private one, so I'll read this one first. Hazel, when do you think, and this is obviously gonna be a ballpark, the first training materials will start to become being worked on, and they'll be the first class taught?
So yeah, I didn't put a schedule in here. The goal is that if we have the charter approved, and it's all up to the Board of Governors, we're not doing this ourselves. This is an NSS project. The idea is that all the members of the VTC will be seated by January 1, and we'll start to build the materials. We hope to have the first basics of the first level 1 course teachable by convention. And the thing is that this is going to be an iterative process, right? We're going to start small, and we're going to start adding people when we got a lot of people to get up to speed. And the people who are appointed to the Council of Regional Coordinators are going to be our first master trainers. And the idea is that they're going to do the teaching at convention, and then those people can take it back to the grottos. So that is the current plan, to have those people seated so we can develop the materials. And it's a lot of work. I mean, if anyone's ever developed curriculum, I do courses all the time, it takes a full month to write a curriculum, and then I'm writing the lectures as I'm teaching them and doing the labs. So it's quite a bit of work. The nice thing is so many people have submitted materials to us right now. I think we're in a very good position. It's going to be mostly a case of curating what we have right now and figuring out how to build that into a sustainable curriculum, but then getting the feedback over and over and over again to improve it and get something that works for everybody.
Hazel, and kind of a follow-up, and I'm going to combine 2 different questions. Can you speak a little bit about how on rope will be used, and if there's a process to update on rope? Those are 2 different.
Yeah, so on rope, I've heard that there's plans. They have some authors lined up. And the idea is that the on rope will be integrated quite closely with the Vertical Training Commission. The idea is that the Vertical Training Commission doesn't have to write all the materials and create like a huge student pamphlet, which is what they've been doing. At least the vertical section has been doing before. The Vertical Training Commission is going to be doing, much more in terms of training guides for the trainers, and then relying more heavily on rope as a kind of like a textbook, like you would use in a regular course. So the idea is that they'll be integrated together. I don't think the new on rope is going to be out for a couple of years, but I do know that that process has started.
I'm going to get to a serious question, but someone asked, who gets credit for the excellent background you have?
The excellent background, that'd be
Yes,
my
I think
mom.
asked who made that awesome background you have.
Oh, the awesome background. Oh, my
Yeah.
background is my mother. I'm gonna have to look on Facebook. Somebody will have to look that up on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay, so for a serious question, is about how will the trainers be selected, and once the curriculum is established, how are you gonna have accountability at the grotto level with the trainers? That's kind of a cute.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Those are, very pertinent. So the first master trainers are going to be the Council of Regional Coordinators. The way we're going to do it is for about, I think is it 6 weeks or 2 months now that we've had that solicitation for volunteers. Do you remember?
I think about 6 weeks, yeah.
6 weeks. So for 6 weeks, the NSS has had a request out for volunteers, people who would like to be involved. And you can sign there, like, I would like to be the national coordinator, or I would like to be a regional coordinator, or a master trainer or trainer. And I believe over 70 people have applied. What we're going to do is create a committee of people that are going to review those applications. We're going to look at, experience, not just in caving, but in education and other aspects, organizational skills, if you've done a lot of your grotto training, all the pieces of information that could could help us decide who of those volunteers fits in the best place. That will create the master trainers and also create the curriculum committee. And then the curriculum committee will design the first materials that goes to the master trainers. They start training and we kind of create that feedback loop. So that's how the people are going to be selected. You just have to volunteer. So if you go to that link that I posted for the charter and feedback on the charter, there's a link there that you can post on to volunteer. And I think, can you put it in the chat, Adam, the link for the volunteer website if people want to volunteer as well?
Yeah, I can
So
do
you can
that.
click on there. Yeah, and we're asking people to explain why they're interested. Background for some of the bigger positions like the master trainers and stuff, we may be looking at asking for resumes, letters of support, similar to NCRC does, because those are going to be important positions. Was that both parts of the question?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I just want to add to, and maybe Hazel will touch on this, but if you apply on that site for a position and you don't become like, the first master trainer for your region, we're keeping the names for the people, and then we're going to give those to the first coordinator for that region. So they'll have a list of volunteers who want to help be the first set of trainers. So they have kind of a group of people already in their region who want to help. So don't be disparaged if you're not one of the first people. So okay, so there's been a couple questions, Hazel, about liability concerns for the trainers themselves being liable for training people.
Mm-hmm. So we're basically following the same system that NCRC uses. We're using the same insurance that NCRC uses. So you'll be covered by the NSS insurance if it's at an event. If you're uncomfortable with the liability and exposure, I certainly carry liability insurance for training people in caving. But if you consider that a liability risk that you're not interested in, then please do not take part. People need to be aware that you need to follow the materials that we're given. We're going to make sure that the materials conform to all the standards of the gear manufacturers. We're not going to be asking you to do anything that's outside of industry standard as far as training on the particular pieces of equipment that we're doing. But if you feel uncomfortable with that kind of exposure, then that is really important for you to consider.
Okay. This question, and I'll answer this one if you want, Hazel, but what would this do to the vertical section in their standing?
So vertical sections, fully behind this, the vertical section wrote a letter of support to the Board of Governors when this was proposed from the ad hoc education committee. I'm on the vertical section. Gene is the chair of the vertical section. He was on the original committee. Gary Bush is on the vertical section. Kurt Walden's on the vertical section. So there's a really important role for the vertical section to play here. I'm hoping that this whole thing will actually kind of launch and reanimate interest in the vertical section. There's certainly been created a lot more people thinking about and talking about vertical, and there's definitely a role for the vertical section there. It's the place to go where people want to communicate about vertical, and if anybody is interested, we need lots of volunteers to help, particularly with the nylon highway. It would be lovely having people write articles for that. It would be lovely to have an editor for that. The vertical section runs programs where people can talk about vertical at convention. It would be great for people in the VTC to be involved in that and giving presentations, especially about education. That's certainly the vertical section provides the avenue for that. And the vertical section does a lot of experiences. The orientation to vertical course that they do is for a lot of people the first time they've ever even touched a climbing rope. So I don't see this as any kind of competition or negating the really important role that the vertical section is playing. If anything, I think this will invigorate and vitalize the vertical section and really help build it back into what it used to be a few years ago, where it had hundreds of members and it was one of the biggest sessions that people would go to at convention. I'd like to see that happen again. Did we lose you, Adam? Did you want to add to that?
No, you did great. I was just going to say that the hope is that they teach Vertical Training Commission curriculum at convention every year for, forever, so
Mhm.
maybe even at 2022, if we say that works out. And Kurt's kind of got a foot in both sides, so he can.
Yeah,
help
there's
us.
lots of us. There's lots
Yeah.
of us that are in both right now.
Yeah. So, I think that I've gotten. Someone wants to know. Do you carry generic liability insurance, or is there caving specific liability policies that you personally have? I think
You
that
should
was-
talk to your insurance agent about what your risks and liabilities are. Everybody should do that regularly when they're thinking about anything. So, yeah.
There was a question a while ago, and this is the last one that I have. So, if folks have more questions, please put them in the chat here. But do we have plans to interact with the groups internationally that are doing this kind of training? Because a lot of countries have great training programs already.
Yeah, we have all of those materials. Quite a few people sent those to me as well. Obviously, we'd have to have a negotiation with those organizations before we could use their materials. But yeah, I think I've got materials from France. I think I've got materials from Hungary, maybe Poland. So I have all those materials, and we'll certainly look at them as a best practices scenario. Yeah.
All right, folks. Any additional questions for Hazel?
Yeah, I have one.
It was quick.
Yeah, I have one. The NSS had a $1 million policy for vertical practices. Is that still going on for grottos? They covered the person's location that it was being held at.
Yeah, so I don't have. I'm not the NSS insurance person. His name is Michael. I can't think of his last name offhand, but I can give you his. If you email me at adam@kz.org, I can send you his contact info. But what grottos can get is they can essentially get the event insurance through the NSS if they make their thing an event, right? So if you have grotto practice and that's an event, you can tie into the same insurance that we use for like convention, right? Because we're is what grottos can get, and that is still a thing that can happen. But like I said, that's a question for Michael. He's our insurance rep through the NSS, and I can get anyone who emails me at again adam@kz.org his contact info. He's a super nice man. If you want to do that, so.
This is an open question, and Hazel, you're free to address this, but I'd like to hear some commentary from some of the other members also. What about international caving techniques such as rebelays? It's not something that's commonly used in the States, but it is a steep learning curve when you go to foreign countries, and it's an essential part of the skill set. Is it the intent of the vertical section to incorporate rebelay techniques in their core curriculum?
So it's not the vertical section, it's the vertical training commission. So that's separate from the vertical section. But yes, so we have, when we did the questionnaire, we got people to submit a list of the top 5 things that people should learn if they're vertically competent, and rebelays is one of them. It's very dependent on where you go caving. Where I go caving, I use them all the time. So one of the things we're trying to get away from is region-specific caving. So there are some areas that don't use rebelays, a lot of areas that do. Not knowing how to cross a rebelay when you encounter a rebelay in a cave is actually one of the more, it's not a common issue, but it tends to be an issue more than other aspects of vertical training. So it would be part of the basic curriculum. But that's up to the curriculum committee. Those are my recommendations to the curriculum committee.
Reblays are fully covered in the core curriculum that you originally talked about, and you waved in front of the screen several months ago and say, this is what we have, and we need something better. Nothing wrong with that. Years ago, when we put that together as a vertical section, it became a very important part of it. And if you look at chapter 12 in this old haggard book here, it covers an amazing amount of core curriculum things. And people don't think that they're covered anywhere. They have been in the vertical section, but it really, what you're doing is exactly what had to happen, because we got stuck in a huge place with a great program and nobody to execute. And there wasn't the trainers that even understood all the aspects of what's available. Even the intermediate course, which a lot of people aren't even aware of, has to do with everything in your level 2 that you talk about. And that is the full knowledge of other people's equipment and how to repair it, or how to fix it, or how to explain it if somebody isn't quite familiar with the bobbin or one of those other aspects that we don't have or don't often use. So it's not that it's not there. It's just that people have chosen to teach what they want or what they know, or they have selectively chosen the aspects that they're going to choose or teach to their grotto, because that's their depth of knowledge. And with what you proposed with this, with having the nationwide trainers that are equipped to teach all aspects of it and are not going to deviate from that, depending on how many people, we don't do that in this grotto, or we're not going to do it in our part of the world. That hasn't worked. That's the biggest part of the current problem, is that everybody wants to be an individual in the United States, and they want my vertical system and my vertical way to do things. And you're on target here. I'm very excited about this entire approach towards, because it's been my lifelong desire to make sure everyone was a safe vertical caver. It's everything I've tried to do all my life. And so in my last days on Earth, I'm looking to see some things to come to fruition.
Bruce, I can't tell you how important that is to hear from you, and that I really have the feels, and if there's anything we can do to continue your legacy and see that through, well, I'll make sure that happens. And I hope that you can find time to help us and be part of this.
I am making that time. It's definitely one of my priorities in the coming years.
You're a legend. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bruce did apply already to be in the thing, so he's already signed up.
Fantastic. Sign him up. I'll need to see the resume, though. I'm not quite sure.
I'm sure it may not qualify. I'm sure at this point. There is a point where we talked about advanced, intermediate, basic, intermediate, and advanced in our original assessment, and the advanced is somebody who is creative and can pull out of a hat all those things that nobody else thought of at the moment to solve dangerous, difficult problems underground. And at this stage of my life, I am no longer in that category. I don't even know if I'm in the intermediate category anymore. I'm probably could barely make myself get to a nice commercial cave, but I'll do it safely, and that's the important part.
That's a great idea. We'll take that. Yeah, we'll take that. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Ron Miller and I teach numerous basic vertical classes and have every year, following the NSS or the vertical section guidelines, and we do the whole thing from beginning to end exactly as prescribed every single time. And we've trained thousands of people, and I think you got to realize that there are thousands of people that are doing it right and that are safe. It's unfortunately that some people have slipped through the cracks and have chosen not to take a training class, and it's been really unfortunate for so many. But there are some great people, like Emily Davis has trained an amazing number of people using the same course. And so what's going to happen to all those individuals that say, well, I'm graduate, I qualified, I blah blah blah, and so
I don't think there's any. I certainly am not trying to prevent anyone from doing anything that they're already qualified and experienced to do. This is more for the people that need that help, like you were saying, that there's a gap. And certainly we're all, we've all been in caves and come across a situation where it's like, well, I could go do this, but it's slightly terrifying, and right, you find some reason not to do it. And I think vertical training is a lot that way, right? Some people don't feel comfortable around bobbing, some people don't feel comfortable on a rack, and so I don't think our goal is to prevent the people that do an excellent job already for continuing to do an excellent job. And you know, certainly your example with you and Ron and with Emily, you know, that's a fantastic program that we don't want to interfere with. What we're trying to do is improve the availability to people that are, as you said, slipping through the cracks, right? And so, you know, in my grotto, there was like a major accident, and it's because the person didn't have what they thought they had without realizing what they needed. And so maybe the goal is to catch those people. It's like, you know, here, you know, for you or Emily or someone like that, you're going to look at these materials and be like, I can teach that at the drop of a hat. And it's like, okay, here's the sign off, do it. And you do the sign off and you're done, right? So it's a skills-based assessment, in which case, like the burden is essentially non-existent. Maybe for people that haven't ever seen a rack in use or something like that, there's a little bit more effort and a little bit more training for there. So what we're trying to do is expand, increase, improve, not restrict and control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I hope it gets to the point where, you know, Bruce, a lot of my friends in the NCRC, you know, talk to Don Paquette and people like that. It's kind of like, oh, we had all this when we were setting up the NCRC, right? 40 years from now, it's going to be the go-to place. And it's not going to be because we excluded people. It's going to be because we did all the things right, which was to make it inclusive and have those correct goals up front. You know, Don said when NCRC was created, that one goal was, we're not trying to create an elite group of cave rescuers. We're trying to put cave rescuers at the scene of the caves when something happens. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create the trainers and put them where they need to be to get to the right people to stop unnecessary accidents happening. And we won't necessarily know how effective we are, but you know, if we see accidents, you know, you and I have read the accident reports, and it's like, oh, you know, why was this person there? Right? Those are the things. If we can start to see those disappear in ACA, you know, I think we've done the right thing. And you know, I'm the committee, SAI. The committee, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give something with legs. We're trying to see something that, yeah, there's going to be squabbling and people yelling elitism and all this kind of stuff for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But 40 years from now, it's going to be the go-to. And the Emilys of the time then are going to be the Emilys that are coming in now and have that 40, 50-year career of teaching.
Good. That's going to be great.
And that's why we want the feedback. We want people to pick holes in this and pull it apart and find the weaknesses that we've overlooked. It's a really strong group that we've put together. And you know, there's a lot of thought that have gone into this. Some people have spent hours and hours putting this thing together. It's not, you know, there's a temptation when you're behind and you're busy and you got things going on. It's like someone puts something in front of you and yeah, that's fine. We've torn this apart and we've rebuilt it 3 times to try and create something that we think's got legs.
It looks very, very, very solid. I think it'll work well.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, folks. So we're an hour in. Do folks have more questions, or have you heard enough from Hazel?
As always, warm in here. I do like to talk. It's my favorite thing, second only to singing.
All right, then. Well, I guess seeing no further questions or comments from the group, I will let Hazel close us out.
I don't know what to close. Anyway, everybody, if you hadn't had the chance and you have comments, please go ahead and make the comments on the site. If you're interested, there's I'm assuming Adam you put that in the link where people could go to sign up if they're interested in partaking.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So it's really exciting. I think we got up to like 60 people at one point. So it's really exciting that people are so engaged. I think we've got 20 comments so far through the portal.
We've gotten a few today, yeah. So we've got,
Yeah. Yep. All right.
Okay then. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Brilliant. Thanks,
Thank
Adam.
you.
Yep.
Nice
Thank you
background.
very much, Hazel.
Thanks. Bye.